Level up your LA Kings experience with the new Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access. Enjoy great seats to the game along with premier dining inside the Lexus Club with all-you-can-eat food and non-alcoholic beverages. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings item and parking with your purchase. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn rewards on each purchase from the only ticket company that rewards you for buying. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings.
You're listening to an LA Kings podcast. For more episodes of this and every other Kings program, visit lakings.com/podcast.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings. Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
All right, we're here to recap Game 5. Joining me to do so, Jack Jablonski. How are you doing today, Jack?
I'm all right. That's all.
Good to hear it. Before we get into this, I've been up for a little bit more than an hour. We're recording this early Wednesday mornings. Today, Wednesday? I don't even know what day it is.
Groundhog's Day.
And I did King's Talk last night. I came home. I couldn't sleep right away. And I had I was thinking. And I found myself interrupting myself on King's Talk a lot. So I'm going to give you permission. I'm actually not just going to give you permission. I'm going to ask you to interrupt me and stop me if you hear me start talking about this series as if it's over.
Okay.
Because the point of this episode is to recap Game 5, not write a eulogy for the series, because the series, to be clear, is not over.
Correct.
So even though I am not feeling great about the series, and I have seen social media and the message boards and the posts and the Reddit and I haven't even dipped a toe in the Discord, but I've seen a lot of Kings fans with a lot of negativity, and I've seen some pushback. I've seen some positivity. The problem is, and this is what I said on Kings Talk last night, the problem is that the difference between confidence and hope is observation. It's easy to hope. Anybody can hope. And that's where we're at right now heading into Game 6. We hope it goes well. But after watching Game 5, I don't have much confidence. So let's dive into the notes, unless you want to weigh in on any of that before we do.
No, I'll let you go. Carry on.
So we're going to go in and same as Game 4. If there's something you really feel the need to weigh in on, feel free. Otherwise, there's a lot of ground to cover, and ultimately we know what happened. Notes started out actually before the game started. Spence and Turcotte in, Lewis and Muvarari out, and the question was, will Spence and Turcotte actually play meaningful minutes? That was a question. The harmonicas, huge cheer for the harmonicas, and there was a chant before the anthem even started, a USA chant, which I thought was funny.
Ironic.
Yeah,
ironic for the Korean speaking.
Yeah. But honestly, I just thought, and it's a theme that we'll hit on many times in my notes. I just thought, okay, the crowd's here. They're ready to go.
That was the thing too, is they were so engaged to start the game.
Yeah.
And then, as your notes will get into, quickly they had nothing to go on.
Yeah. So there's going to be just a lot of notes like this one. I just wrote, gotta score first. And I don't even remember what time I wrote it. It first 90 seconds, I think. But I mean, my attitude was just okay, this crowd desperately wants to go crazy.
Yeah.
It's 2-2. Everybody believes, whether it's true or not, everybody believed at that point that the series could have been 3-1, if not over already.
Correct.
So come in here and let's prove it, right? Let's give the crowd a reason to express that. Nurse was booed loudly right away. So loudly that I asked Zach, I'm not sure if you heard me ask him, but at one point I said, is everybody yelling louder than they usually do, or is it just everybody actually yelling? Because the volume went up huge when he got booed.
Yeah, turn it up to 10.
Yeah.
I said this multiple times to you last night, and I still think I have a point. Should we be cheering Darnell Nurse?
Yes.
Because he has done us a lot of favors.
Yeah, Well, and it's
2 penalties yesterday.
Yeah.
So I think we should absolutely,
Yeah, be
So
very
this,
happy that he wasn't suspended for the whole series.
and that he's on the ice because he
Yeah.
has just been very generous for the Kings. Carry
Yeah.
on.
This was a note that I had a lot in games 3 and 4, and I was sort of like, yeah, okay, that's just a fan reaction, but I don't necessarily think it's a good idea. And that's, come on, punch someone. Now, I'm not advocating for violence, but in the first period, I just felt like, okay, this has been a series where Edmonton has been more aggressive. And if you subscribe to the theory that the Kings wore down or needed more in the tank, that it wasn't there, that is an element of the game that can impact that. If games 1 through 4, every after the whistle play, if anybody did anything untoward, it was almost always an Oiler player. And anyway,
Yeah, I mean, but that's part of their game. Like the Kings have always been
totally.
very even keeled and very much go about their business.
And Edmonton has won the last 3 years in a row.
The reason why,
Yeah.
but for for me, the Kings' aggressiveness has to come, in different ways. Of course, by that I mean the forecheck,
Yeah.
tenacity, the you know annoyance, the little brother that doesn't go away type of aggressiveness versus the after the whistle shenanigans that Corey Perry and Vander Kane thoroughly partake in. But that's
Yeah.
that's who they are and that's what they do. It's just two different teams. Of course, one
Yeah.
team has won three of the last three and are up 3-2, and the other team is not.
Yeah.
But it's that they're two different teams. They go about their ways in two different ways.
So at this point, everything I've written down already is within the first 2 minutes of the game, because I noticed, Gavrikov and Edmondson are already out as a pair. And it was like the
Yeah.
third shift or something. And I was like, well, okay, I guess we're not going to play the full roster. We're going to go right back to what we've been doing. I wrote feels tentative. I don't remember what I was thinking about, but I think that's a fair note for much of the first period. Kemper coming up
Yeah.
huge on the penalty kill. So that would have been the first Kings penalty kill.
That was a theme.
Yeah. I wrote get control back with an exclamation point, because the Kings, obviously if you're on the penalty kill, you don't have control. Then I think that was what the next play was, when I think was it Kuzmenko who did the spin around. They had the odd man rush and they didn't take a shot, and there was like a
the spin around ended up in the corner. Yep.
Yes, yeah, that didn't go to a man. I wrote way too cute play in the offensive zone on an odd man rush. Particularly, they weren't getting outplayed massively at that point, but it was early. So, I wrote crowd feeling it, a big hit, net front scrum, Kings power play. Goal here would send this place crazy. If you let Edmonton score, you kill it. The crowd. That was my note at the time. Please score! Exclamation point.
Did it work?
No, it did not. Not that time. It did eventually, but
yeah.
Then the note is this power play has gone away, but all caps why? And listen, I don't need the power play to score 40% of the time, but I need them to look like they're controlling. And Edmonton has either sorted the power play or the power play has stopped controlling play. And
you tend not to change things, or you don't really make adjustments when it's working, right? Of course, you maybe want to add a little play here or a different type of sequence to create, a different look. But of course, Edmonton, I think, is first and foremost, they've been more aggressive on the penalty kill, which, take a note out of the King's book, I guess, right? Because the first two games when the Kings, of course, had their 4 power play goals or whatever the number was, I can't remember off the top of my head. The Kings won the face-offs in the offensive zone, which is obvious, of course, step one to a successful power play. But then on top of it, Edmonton had to instantly go into a shell, and I felt like in the games up in Edmonton, they were more aggressive to try to make the Kings make 3 or 4 passes perfectly without hesitation type of, because if they were going to hesitate, then all of a sudden it's a deflected pass or clogging up the middle. Or what I did notice was, Kempe wins the puck out back on the draw, and he's the guy on the point, and the Kevin Fiala pass for a one-timer is taken away immediately.
Yeah.
So they force it over to Kopitar, who's on his strong side, which is obviously not a shot option. It's little different adjustments that take away from what was working for the Kings, since they had gone to the 5-man unit in the last, few games of the regular season. And of course, what happened in game 1 and game 2, Edmonton made some adjustments, and so far it's worked. Of course, the Kings do cash in on a power play in the second period, but they didn't have as many, comfortable looks, I would say, compared to what we had seen.
I'm not going to get into it right now, but I'm just going to say this. I wish if the series was 3-2 and Edmonton was 60% on the power play and the Kings were 10%, I'd be like, well, all right. That was predictable.
Not great when
but it's not what's
a
happening.
little bit. Yeah.
All right. So the next 3 notes are all basically the same. 12 minutes in and we're getting outplayed. Kemper with another game-saving save. If the Kings win this game, it will be thanks to Kemper. Kemper was unbelievable. I mean, that's...
Yeah, do you want me to slide into the expected goals stat here?
No, not yet.
Not yet?
We'll
I'll leave it.
We will get there.
Here's your teaser.
0-0, 2 left, survive, and the game resets, please. Like, that's where I was with 2 minutes left in the first period. Just get to the intermission 0-0, and then the first period never happened. You got massively outshot, but who cares? It's 40 minutes left. Yes, momentum carries. Yes, things matter. But at some level, reset, go in. We've seen it, right? Anybody who's watched sports, when there's a break, halftime, period break, whatever it is, teams come out, games change.
Well, yeah, that's a thing too, right? Because the Kings, how many times have we seen the Kings start with, say the Deneau, Fogle, and Trevor Moore line, and they get in on the forecheck to start a period, and all of a sudden it snowballs into 35, 40 seconds of good offense. You keep the puck in the offensive zone, control possession, and it's like the first period never happened. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case.
Yeah, and then I wrote the last minute. So this is at 1 minute left in the first period. So from 2 minutes left to 1 minute left, the last minute just felt like the end of a game with the Kings hanging on to a lead. Like Edmonton was pressing and the Kings were just trying to get to the first intermission break. And that was not comforting.
Yeah, it very much felt like a continuation of overtime from game 3 or 4.
Then came the play where Gavrikov had McDavid down on the ice along the boards. In real time, I thought he was the sole aggressor and was going over the top to hit McDavid. And I was like, you are going to get yourself thrown out of the league because that's Connor McDavid. And say what you want about refs and bias and officiating, whatever. Like, you can't just cross-check Connor McDavid in the head when he's laying prone on the ice. Then I saw the replay and I was like, okay, maybe it wasn't that bad. But I still think the Kings escaped without a penalty there, and I don't blame Evander Kane for coming to the defense of Connor McDavid in that moment.
Yeah, we had a little conversation on that play, during the game itself, and it very much looked like Gavrikov was just going at McDavid in a very vulnerable position. Upon replay, McDavid may have been holding on to Gavrikov's stick, and that was part of the reason that Gavrikov was going after him. But yeah, absolutely, when it comes to Evander Kane responding to seeing what was happening, regardless of who the aggressor was or not, you're not going to just let Connor McDavid take a few shots, whether it's warranted. So, of course, it looked probably worse than it was, but at the same time, I do agree that I thought the Kings were lucky to get out of that at 5-on-5.
And, I'm going to nip this conversation in the bud right here, because I've seen people say, like, oh, the referees. And it's like this, I said it last night on Kings Talk. I've never heard somebody say that. I've never seen somebody watch a game, any sport, any level, anything, anywhere in my life, where somebody went, wow, what a great officiated game. The officials really did an excellent job tonight. Just 60 minutes of crisp, clear, precise, calling it by the rules, like dynamite job by them. Doesn't happen.
The only sport where you can say that is baseball, because they have a strike zone chart where they're like,
Right.
well, he didn't miss. He called a perfect game in terms of strikes and balls. Otherwise, there's so much. I
Yeah.
agree in the aspect of there's so much up in the air for interpretation, and that's where everyone
Mhm.
differentiates themselves on what they think is a penalty or not according to the rule book, right? Football, baseball, or football, basketball, hockey, in terms of the major four sports, all of them are, interpretations on, did he cross the line or not? So fair
But
point.
that's why you've got to win by more than a goal. Because if you win
Yeah,
6-2, we're not evaluating the officiating. Game two,
correct.
we're not even. I can't remember a single call from game two. Doesn't matter. 6-2, Kings won. Game four, I remember.
Mm,
They didn't call a penalty at the end, and they did call a penalty at the end of overtime. I remember it intimately because it mattered. You got to make it not matter. So that's that. Anyway, into the second period. Better start, but still relying on Kemper. Kings get a power play. I wrote, score now, make this place go crazy. They did. It did. I wrote, foolishly, first period doesn't matter, 1-0. I thought the crowd was, and I got a couple of people messaging me about this during the game. I thought the crowd was chanting Skinner and not Pickard. Now, the two names are
yeah,
very similar.
yeah, they're similar in the on
The
the
cadence.
undulation
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
of how their name is. It sounded, I picked up on Pickard, but
I heard
it
both, but I had
yeah.
got messages from people going like, "Are we chanting Skinner?" And I was like, "That's kind of what it sounds like to me." But whatever, the crowd wanted it anyway. And then this is every now and then. I know it can dip into negativity, but every now and then negativity is a good predictor because at 1-0, I mean, literally like moments after the Kings scored, I wrote "next goal wins?" ? Um, because that's the kind of game it was, right? Like at 1-0, with Edmonton outplaying them the way they were, the Kings needed to keep getting bounces and goals to build that lead because we've already seen Edmonton crawl back into games, and Edmonton was already in crawl back mode. Not crawl
Yeah.
back, but you know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
anyway, so huge kill time. I wrote, so the Kings had to kill a penalty. I wrote Kings.
You finished that note before
Yes,
8 seconds after the
yes.
penalty.
I wrote. So this leads directly into the Edmonton goal. The Kings are getting the bounces. They're getting the goaltending. They're getting the crowd support. Now give. I don't know what word. I didn't go back and correct my spelling on this one. So it says give the Fort Abs the goals. I don't know what Fort Abs. It must be fans, but
The
anyway.
fans, I would think, yeah.
Yeah, so Fort Abs. If you want a new word for for fans, it's Fort Abs.
Hashtag Fort Abs.
And then I wrote GD.
Gosh darn.
Exactly. Right after the power play, and Edmonton scores from distance. Lame.
The whole, I mean, for me, you look at that first half of the game, right?
Mhm.
Or the first 25 minutes, 26 minutes, I believe, which got it to a 1-1 game. The Kings felt like they were on the penalty kill the whole time, right?
Yeah.
And then of course you're playing with fire when Edmonton gets on the power play, but they handled it, right? And of course Edmonton had multiple really good looks, but Darcy Kemper stood extremely tall on every task, and they won the face-offs to start the penalty kills, and again, you killed the penalties, right? You won the power play penalty kill battle across 60 minutes. And it very much felt like this whole narrative of what we had seen the Kings do in the first 40 minutes of games 1 through 4 was flipped for 60 minutes in game 5. And, what we're used to seeing the Kings do, they win the 5-on-5, they lose the penalty kill power play battle. That's what we'd seen in the last 3 playoff series. It was the exact opposite. And the Kings, of course, Drew Doughty gets back onto the ice for 5 or 6 seconds, and Evander Kane ends up with the puck in the slot. And, credit where credit is due, as much as we hate Evander Kane and, doesn't necessarily have the best track record on or off the ice. He's a heck of a hockey player, and he beat Kemper with a perfect shot right next to the ear.
I got into it briefly on King's Talk last night because somebody called in and was like, we're getting beaten by their scrubs and their bums. And I was like, well, let's pause on that. I was like, I understand that we don't like Evander Kane, but next season, assuming he plays more than 70 games, he'll pass 1,000 career games. He's got 360 something goals, 326 goals. Like, he's a good player. He has been very good at stops in his career. And yes, he's not Connor McDavid, but nobody is. So Corey Perry, Evander Kane, Hyman, like, they have really, like, yes, the Kings should be winning the series and the Kings' depth is better, but let's not pretend that this is Connor McDavid in the AHL All-Stars. Like, this is a good team. The rest of the notes get pretty, like, non-hockey-ish, because at that point my spirit was just crushed. Sorry, everybody. So I'm just going to burn through them and, stop me when you get bored, because there's a larger conversation to be had, and I think we should have it. The next note is, okay, how do you bounce back? You can't let this Edmonton team have 24 shots on goal 28 minutes into the game.
Yeah.
Like, you just can't. They're going to score. Edmonton goal really shut the crowd up for a few minutes. That's why you can't let that happen. That's why it's important when you have a crowd ready to go, like they were, and to be clear, they were, and we'll get into some very specific notes. Which one's coming later. The crowd was,
well, I mean, that's what home ice advantage was for, right?
But I mean, this was not on the crowd. The crowd was,
oh, no. The crowd was waiting to just explode. And, they had that brief instance where you get the power play goal.
Yep.
It lasted, I believe, 2 minutes and 47 seconds.
Here's one hockey note, which I don't really want to get into, but whatever. When Kane hit Kempe and it looked like it might have been knee on knee, I was expecting a penalty. There wasn't one. I was upset, but I also wrote that the crowd seems more upset about it than the players on the ice.
Well, you can't go after Kane behind the play, right? Kempe was the last man back, makes the pass. So now the puck is in the neutral zone heading into Edmonton's zone while Kempe is on the ice, back at the goal line. Kempe got up and skated away. So it's not like he's down injured, stop the play, go after Kane.
Yeah.
If anyone would have gone after Kane, it would have been a penalty. And I would want to see the replay one more time before I could give you a solid comment on it. But the debate that has to be had on that play specifically is, did Kane change his angle, or did Kempe try to get out of the way, and that's why he got hit in the leg? Again, no call was the call on the ice, and I believe Jesse Cohen said, you have to win by multiple goals so that doesn't become a topic of conversation. So
that's why I said, there's not much to say about it, because that it's, even if they had that power play, does anybody really think it would have changed anything? And my answer today is no.
Well, they just scored on the power play 5 minutes earlier, and it's a 1-1 game. Who knows?
Maybe.
Regardless.
Yes, but if
you understand why it wasn't called, and you earn your luck, right?
Yes. All right. So the next note is Kemper with 28 saves with 7 minutes left. That's a full game's worth of work. Almost halfway, like just past the halfway mark.
I believe the King. What was the stat in? I know you're doing King's talk, but when Jim Hiller was being talked, or when Jim Hiller talked in the post game media, I think someone threw out a stat like the Kings have been outshot 79-35 in the last. Five periods. 3-1. Since the 3-1 going into the third period. So Kemper. We talk a lot about fatigue. You really hope the fatigue aspect doesn't trickle into the crease, because Kempe, who's obviously been overworked in in much of the last, the whole series in general, but mainly in the last,
you mean Kemper? You said
3
Kempe.
games. Oh, yes, sorry, Kemper.
Yeah, there's too many KMP names. So funny you should mention fatigue, because the next note I wrote, and this is sort of the broader question of the last 3 games, but might as well talk about it now. The note is this fatigue or just Edmonton pressing? And my answer in the moment right now at 9 a.m. on Thursday morning is both and neither. Like
Elaborate, Jesse.
Jim Hiller said it perfectly in the post-game press conference last night. Edmonton
Mhm.
was better last night in
In
every
every
facet
facet.
of the
Yeah.
game. And he, I believe he used the word unacceptable, which is usually my least favorite word when used from a fan base, because as I've said, the word unacceptable implies a threat. It implies control. If I say to you, Jack, listen, we said to come on this call at 8:30 and you were 2 minutes late, and that's unacceptable. The implication there is that I can do something about it.
Yeah.
If I say to you, Jack, you need to be 6'9", and if you're not, it's unacceptable. Well, okay, fine. You're not 6'9". No offense. You're very tall, but you're not that tall. You know what I mean? And there's nothing to be done about it, right? I wish I was 5'10". I thought for years I was. Then I go to the hospital. It turns out I'm 5'8". Well, unacceptable. Well, okay, fine, unacceptable. But there's nothing to be done about it. Jim Hiller can do something about it, right? When he says something is unacceptable, you go, okay, that means something.
Yeah, just on that topic, when it comes to, what Hiller was saying, he was asked about the fatigue factor throughout the whole game. It's like, were you guys just tired? And his response, I thought, was the right answer, but also totally true. And it was, well, fatigue shouldn't be the case in the first period. And we didn't have it from the
drop,
drop of the puck. I understand that if you're going to continue to roll three lines, and the fourth line played 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and 5 minutes, which I guess is technically a slight upgrade from the previous few games.
Yes, very slight.
But that's not the case, right? You're not tired when the game starts. You're tired as the game goes on. So the Kings clearly didn't have it from the beginning, which is unacceptable because it's a playoff game. You have home ice advantage. It's now become a best of three. I understand that, as a player, the mindset may be, wow, damn, we had this. What happened? Now it's 2-2. But when the puck drops, it's game on. You're not sitting there on the bench going, guys, we should have had a 3-1 lead. It's 0-0. Let's win this game. And so the mindset, or the readiness, the attention to detail, the sloppy, or the lack of attention to detail, the sloppiness in the D zone, the lack of tenacity or aggressiveness, the invisible forecheck, that's what was unacceptable. And I don't know what Jim Hiller is going to do about it, because you've got to put your best roster out there, and whatever he may deem that be come tomorrow in Edmonton. It'll be very interesting what that sentence of "it was unacceptable" turns into when it comes to adjustments or changes made.
And obviously the fear is that it doesn't lead to anything, right? Like that you just lose game 6 and then the series is over. That's a whole other conversation. All right. I just really like Jim Hiller's answer, and you mentioned it perfectly. He said, he literally said, we didn't have it from the opening puck drop, and that's not fatigue. That's just they were better than us. Which is why I say both and neither, because it's not, I don't necessarily believe that Edmonton did anything to the Kings to make them play that way, because by Jim Hiller's own admission, it started right away. It wasn't like the Kings had a good 2 minutes and then Edmonton adjusted and sorted it out and the Kings didn't even have an answer. It was like from the first shift, Edmonton was
just
better.
Did not have it. Yeah.
Yeah. And who knows?
I agree in the aspect that it's both and neither, right? Because I felt fatigue as the game went on. Maybe they didn't have, the gas tanks, at full because of, maybe the ice time or the decision to not play a fourth line in basically every game. And now when you need them the most, they don't have everything they've got in the tank because of it. Or, but at the same time, you're right. Maybe it's neither, because, again, it was evident from the beginning that this was ugly.
So the next note is about the crowd again. And
okay.
And listen, here's why I think it matters, and it ties into the fatigue conversation as well. This is going to be a weird analogy. Apologies in advance. If I go out there to the driving range and I line up a golf shot and I decide I am gonna put every ounce of force I have into whacking this ball as hard as I can, and then I miss the ball, it hurts to miss. And
Yeah.
I don't just mean hurts like, oh, I'm experiencing pain. I mean, all that energy that I put into that swing is now gone. And on top of that, I am embarrassed, I am discouraged, I am, frustrated that I didn't make contact. So then to replicate that effort is difficult.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons home ice, despite the fact that it doesn't matter as much as maybe some people think it does, one of the reasons it does matter is that if you survive the first period and then score that first goal and the crowd goes nuts, you will get more energy from the crowd. So the note is the crowd wants to get into this game, but the Kings never give them a reason, parentheses, except for another big Kemper save. Because as I was writing that, he made another big save and the crowd cheered and it was like, okay, Darcy Kemper desperately trying to win this series by himself. And then here's the note, and I showed it to you and you asked me if I was going to keep it in the notes. And I said, you're absolutely right, I am. With 14 seconds left in the second period, and Edmonton once again pressing in the Kings zone, and once again the Kings desperately holding on to try to make it to the intermission with a tie, the puck left the zone. It didn't leave the zone by like a wide margin. It wasn't a clearing situation. The Kings didn't skate it out. They didn't whack it down the ice. It wasn't like a great play. I think Edmonton was trying to connect a pass, and there just wasn't anybody there. And the puck
it felt like a power play, and the puck
happened to trickle past the blue line by like, I don't know, 3 inches maybe.
Yeah,
but enough that it was clearly out of the zone, and so Edmonton had to pull all their guys out, and the crowd went wild. Not sarcastically, not in a Bronx cheer kind of way where a goalie who's gotten shelled finally makes a lazy stop and everyone goes, oh, good job out of you. No, that was a genuine, the crowd was watching, they were paying attention, they were invested, something good happened. They wanted to cheer for it. It's just at that point, that was what was something good. Was the puck went out of the zone for 2 seconds and the Edmonton had to reset, which meant essentially that their attack was done for the second period.
Correct. It wasn't great that the bar got lowered to that.
No, but again, good for the crowd. The crowd was in it, and that's what caught my attention.
The crowd was begging for a reason to cheer, and I don't know if you have it in the notes or kept it in the notes for the third period, but looking for just any reason to try to get into the game, and unfortunately, the Kings could not sustain any zone pressure, any reason to.
Yeah,
I hate saying this, but it's any reason the fans were just looking for something, and the Kings just couldn't give them anything last night.
Yeah, this is a depressing episode. I apologize, everybody listeing. Okay,
well, if you watch the game,
yeah, third period, and there are not very many notes in this third period, but so we're just going to burn through them. The first note comes at the goal, which was 7 minutes into the period, or 6 minutes, or whatever it was, and at that point, it's 2-1. And I wrote, was that the series? Which I don't.
We'll find out, Jesse.
Yeah,
we'll find out.
Yeah, like I said, stop me because the series is not over. There's a game 6 yet to be played. And I wrote, and now I've gone back and watched the replay of that goal that made it 2-1, and I saw Bissonnette's breakdown of it, and I concede that this take I have right here may not necessarily be brilliant, but this is what I wrote. Not every goal is a horrible mistake. That's why you don't let it stay close. Because in retrospect, I can look back and watch the replay and go, okay, the neutral zone breakdown is why that opportunity happened. But the Podkolzin shot, or no, the Arvidsson shot and the Podkolzin goal. Listen.
Janmark.
Yeah, Janmark. Sorry, thank you. Teams score goals, right? Games don't end 0-0. Teams score goals. And in order to score a goal, something had to quote unquote go wrong. But it's not always some catastrophic mistake. Sometimes hockey just happens and people score goals.
Yeah. I mean, there was of course, Edmonton gains possession in the neutral zone and enters the King zone on a 3-on-2 odd man rush. And the goal that Edmonton scores is a type of goal that every youth coach teaches.
Mm-hmm.
Guy in the middle of the zone gets the puck, you enter the zone, you move it across to the outside, and you rush the net. Because then all of a sudden, 2 defensemen have to make a choice. There's the guy with the puck, and there's a guy who, if you don't cover him, he's going to be wide open in front of the net. So middle lane drive causes the issue, and then third guy high slash, the weak side
Yep.
where Yanmark is, you throw up, a hard shot to the far side of the goalie. The rebound kicks out to the weak side, and boom, a rebound goal. And it's exactly what it's exactly how you would draw up a 3-on-2 odd man rush. Every team and every player has practiced that play in practice thousands of times in their career. Of course, again, we've seen Arvidsson shoot the puck extremely effective. It's not like Darcy had poor rebound control. First and foremost, you've got to make the save. He made the save, and the rebound kicked out wide to a guy who was wide open because of the way that they entered the zone. So it's an unfortunate thing for Darcy, because you just feel for him on how well he played. The amount of times he made a save on what we thought were sure goals. It's unfortunate because you've got a rebound in responding in game 6, but it was a perfectly executed play by the Edmonton Oilers.
That's why you don't let it get there.
Well, we were lucky that it was even there at the time.
No, agreed. And the next note is, at that point, McDavid and Draisaitl had been held off the score sheet completely. And my next note is, McDavid and Draisaitl still need their points, because the reality is they don't play games against the Kings in the playoffs where they don't get any points between the two of them. So
that's a good point.
It was 2-1, and I was like, these two guys are not done yet, and we still need to climb back in this thing. The next note, at this point, the only way the Kings win is a miracle steal. This next one is a crowd one again, and it's rough, man. It's rough. It was a rough night. There was a brief chant that felt like the entire stadium. 6 minutes left. Edmonton out shooting the Kings 43-18. Shoot the puck. I don't believe I've ever heard in my life, in any game, Kings or non, the entire arena yelling "shoot the puck." I've heard people yell "shoot, shoot," but I've never heard like a "shoot the puck" chant before.
Yeah, that was a first for me as well, and it kind of just felt like a pretty low moment.
Yeah, that was rough. The next note, and again, this is the last note, and it's again a crowd note. I wrote, Game Ops has done everything they can to try and drag this crowd into a frenzy, but if the team isn't bringing it, the crowd won't come. Sorry, them's the rules. And that was
yes.
And then we saw the noise meter for either the second or third time in the game. I don't remember which, but I know it was at least the second. I feel like it might have been the third.
Yeah, things had trended in such an unfortunate and poor direction at that point that, like you said, the game ops, it was like, first you throw up Will Ferrell, then you throw up Bob Miller, then you throw up Paul Bissonnette, then you throw up, the noise meter, then you bring in Isaiah Mustafa with the live microphone.
Scared both of us out of our minds.
that microphone was turned all the way up, and so were the speakers. Almost jumped out of my chair.
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone was just, they tried everything, and it sadly felt like the crowd at that point was like, we gave you what we had, and this isn't going well. So not great. But the whole game, just, it's one to forget. And hopefully you can put it behind you, and we know how important it's going to be when it comes to the beginning of game 6, because this may have been the worst game they've played this season.
Yeah. Well, yes. Okay. I was waiting for how that sentence ended, but yeah, this might have been the worst game they played all season. And again, and the heartbreaking part of it. So then, empty netter, McDavid and Draisaitl get their points, both of them. And you go like, oh, okay, well, there it is. They're on the scoreboard.
They got it.
But yeah, to have a game that important where you, again, by your own coach's admission, are outplayed in every aspect. And, when he said, except for the special teams play, let's be realistic. They won the special teams battle statistically, but Edmonton scored the goal seconds after their power play ended. And
Yes, but they killed off the important part, which was
yes,
McDavid and Draisaitl weren't even on the ice.
they
So at that point, you've got to be like, nothing. You can't allow it.
but I mean, my point is just, if you want to say, well, the Kings won the special teams battle, okay, maybe by the numbers, because the Kings went 1 for 2 or whatever it was, and Edmonton went 0 for. But really, how well they played, I don't think the Kings were particularly dangerous or strong on the bat. Now, they were, yes, you should be getting scoring chances, and there were one-timers and shot attempts, and like, okay, fine, it's the power play. But I don't know, man. It's just really hard to watch that game.
It was hard to watch the game because what we had seen in games 1 through 4 was a Kings team that was the better team in, I believe, 10 of the 13 periods.
Yeah.
And in a span of one game, Edmonton doubled the amount of periods that they had controlled and were the better team within the series.
Yep.
Of course, there's from a fan's perspective, and I think it's more important to address this because we look at it like this should be over. We shouldn't be in this situation. And while, of course, a player who is on the team or the coaching staff, whatever, looks at it like we probably shouldn't be in this situation. You also, as an athlete, are trained mentally to put it behind you. What happened in the past doesn't matter anymore. It's what happens in the next game. And that's what has been so important for successful athletes to be able to rebound and respond, or it's a best of 7 series. Of course, there's going to be ebbs and flows. No one went into this series expecting a sweep. Of course,
Right.
what we saw through games 1 through 2, and then the first 2 periods of game 3, and then of course the first 2 periods of game 4.
Mm-hmm.
So much of you was like, well, we should have swept them, or we should be up 3-1.
Could have. I won't say should, but it's conceivable that it could have happened.
Yes, it's conceivable that it could have happened, but now it's in the past, and it's like, all right, we have to go and we have a job to do. We have to go win a game in that building. We've done it before. We've done it multiple times before. We had won more games in Edmonton than we had in LA in the previous 3 series combined. So for me, I'm very curious and intrigued to see what this team has to start the game. They know the attention to detail, and they have to be crisp, and the pressure that is now that they've put on themselves, or that the coaching staff has put on themselves. Both of those groups have questions to answer, and it's going to start from the drop of the puck in game 6.
So here's what I'm struggling with. Well, a lot, but one other thing that I'm struggling with. I frequently like to say that if everybody agrees, it usually means that they're wrong, right? Like that's one of my hallmarks, right? Is that like if 100% of people agree on something, it usually means you're wrong. And I'm going to use 2 examples of how I apply that rule. One is, and apologies in advance, Jack, if I insult you for your worldviews, but the world is round.
Okay. Nope, we're on the same page.
Perfect. Good. I figured you were with me on that one. Most right-thinking people, and apologies if you're a flat earther listening to this, but you're wrong. Most right-thinking people understand that the world is round, right? There's math, there's photos, there's a million simple ways to demonstrate that the world is round, and yet there are people who don't believe it. And it is that small group of people who don't believe it that approve my rule, that when everybody agrees on something, it's wrong, because there's always at least one crazy person out there who's like, well, I don't know. And it's that crazy person that makes you go, oh my God. All right, let's double check. Are the things that all of us agree actually true? Because we can't convince this small group of people that it's true. And that's why you need that small group of people. That's why I like contrarians. That's the whole thing. But sometimes, Jack, sometimes, but not always, you walk outside the front door and you look up and you go, you know what? The sky's blue. And that's it. It just is. And I'm not interested. I'm not interested in arguments. I'm not interested in, well, maybe, well, what are we? Nope. Everybody on the planet has, for all eternity, has looked up. We've all seen the same exact sky, and it's blue. And everybody
Mm-hmm.
agrees that it's blue. And there's just not a conversation to be had about it. And to make it about this series, sorry to do all that. The problem is that I feel right now is that people who are watching the series, every market, every layer, coaches, players, broadcasters, fans, commentators, the disinterested, whatever, everybody's attitude seems to be the Kings are blowing it. Right? I've not seen one person go, well, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are really good. Like, nah, man, they didn't even factor into Game 5. Right? Like, Connor McDavid was
Well,
laughing.
they
Like,
did.
not,
They
but I
did.
mean,
They had the puck on their stick for half the
yes.
game. But yes. No, I was curious on where you were going to go with that. But the Kings have missed an opportunity, no question.
Yeah.
They had an opportunity to have, at the very least, a stranglehold on the series. Of course, that's not the case anymore. It was after 2 games, but missed opportunities led to the Kings now on a 3-game losing streak, facing elimination, heading into an opposition's building. Sorry,
it just sounds so depressing when you say it that way.
When I said facing elimination, your shoulders dropped and your head went down. My apologies, Jesse.
That's all
but
right.
No, listen, it's I go back to the age-old saying of it's not how many times you get knocked down, it's about how many times you get back up, something along those lines, I think. I'm not great with cliches. It's more of your category, Jesse.
Yeah.
But the Kings got knocked down multiple times, and I guess they kind of got back up, in game 5. But frankly, it's about getting back up for game 6, right? They have an opportunity to go into a building, go into a game where you have been the better team for 4 of the 5 games, and bring it home. They have an opportunity to have game 7 on home ice. If that's not enough motivation, if that's not enough reason to give everything you've got, then of course, whoever isn't the one giving everything they've got is playing the wrong game. But for me, there's an opportunity to respond. Of course, when you're the team who loses, it's kind of on you, or it's the ball is in your court to make changes, whether it's personnel, whether it's strategic, whether it's mindset. The Kings were taught a hard lesson in game 5. And that, to me, most importantly, was if you don't bring your all, Edmonton is going to absolutely obliterate you.
Yep.
And the Kings brought their all for the majority of, well, I would even say they brought their all for games 1 through 4. I think there were a few mistakes made, and I won't get into that led to the demise of games 3 and 4. But it wasn't a lack of effort. It wasn't a lack of attention to detail. It was a few different things that I think led to the losses. For me, game 5 was a completely different story, and it was just, it was the players that didn't show up or didn't have it for whatever reason. I don't think we have to get into it further.
Well, there's no way of knowing. I mean, we can speculate, right? But I don't know. I wasn't there.
Yeah,
in the room.
No,
I was in the building, but like, well.
A lot of people were in the building.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. Game 5 was completely different in terms of the performance and the everything, frankly, everything. And it can't happen again, because the score will be 7-0, especially in that building. So a response is needed. It's on the team that loses to have the response, or at least, show that they're going to do something different. Of course, they're going to need to if they want to continue this series.
There's obviously, you mentioned my thing is cliches and whatever, and I love quotes, and I've spent a lot
Analogies.
of
Yep.
time, yeah, and I spent a lot of time over the last week or so, like I've been working on this goofy thought in my free time for, I don't know, months now, that understanding stories is important to understanding life, whatever. I won't get into it right now, but anyway, the point is, I can't quite put my finger on how to express it perfectly yet, but the fact that this feels like a massive wasted opportunity is what makes it so galling. If Connor McDavid came out and was putting up 9 points a game, then at some point you just shrug and you go, it's not fair, man. Like, it's not fair, right? Like, you just go like, oh, come on. Like when Detroit was, sweeping us in 2000, and then, you just go like, all right, well, it's Detroit. They're incredible, and like, you just go like, all right, well, okay. I don't like it and it stinks, but you measure yourself against impossible odds.
Yeah, it's not being down 3-2. It's how they're down 3-2.
Yes, and that was one thing I said during King's Talk last night. Sports is full of lies, unfortunately, because we want it to be beautiful. We want it to be this beautiful expression of joy and truth and all this stuff. But the reality is, a lot of sports is just people lying to themselves. And one of them that 99% of the time is true is it's not. They don't ask how, they ask how many. Right? How many times have we said that to ourselves, right? Like casually, we just say it all the time. Well, they don't ask how, they ask how many. Well, last night wasn't about how many. Last night was about how.
Absolutely.
Because last night was close. Like, to be clear, like at one point late in the game, I was talking to one of our coworkers in the press box, and he said, like, listen, all of the complaints and all of the criticisms we have were however many minutes left in the game, and it's 2-1. Bad bounce, and it's there. And like, that's what's so galling about this is that, again, it's that the sky is blue thing. Like the phrase "we were right there," which was uttered last summer, has become such a rallying cry for a certain portion of the fan base to be like, don't say that. Like, it's not true. But then you're sitting there watching this game and you're like, well, shoot, man. It was only 2-1 with like 10 minutes left in the third period. A lucky bounce, a power play goal, it's tied, maybe. And I said it during King's Talk. At some point, you use the word "if" so many times that you realize your entire argument is constructed out of ifs, and none of them actually. You didn't cash in a single if. And at the end of the night, you're just left with a barrel of ifs, and you're like, well, this is worthless. This is worth absolutely nothing but a 3-2 deficit in a series.
Yeah, no ifs were converted last night, and frankly, not many were close. I'm sorry. It definitely is about the how, and they've unfortunately put themselves in this situation. It's time to respond. If this team is who we hope they could be, when it came to what we have seen through 82 games, then hopefully they'll have a solid response, and we'll get to watch another home game on Saturday.
Yes. Well said. There is reason for hope, though I would argue not much, but we have seen...
Stop.
We've seen them do it.
I have to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Nope, we're not doing that.
All right, fair enough.
We're not doing that.
Jack, I will speak to you after a Game 6 win on...
There we go.
On whatever morning it is. I've lost track.
Friday morning.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Friday morning. All right. Thanks for joining me, Jack.
Of course.